Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Hiring Changed, Recruiting Didn't, How TA Teams Can Level Up Now. I'm Josh Jones, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's session led by the one and only Mike Rasmussen. Hiring has changed dramatically since 2020, and many recruiting teams are still relying on outdated playbooks that no longer deliver the results they need. Today, Mike is going to take an honest look at why more tools, more activity, and more reporting haven't automatically led to better hiring outcomes. He's going to explore what it looks like when talent acquisition teams move beyond simply managing requisitions and begin truly shaping hiring decisions for their organizations. Before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Please use the chat feature to connect with your fellow attendees during the session. If you have questions, please submit those through the Q&A tab, and we'll get to as many of those as possible. Today's session is being recorded. We will share the recording with everyone shortly after the webinar ends. Mike, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to hand things over to you. Take it away.
Sounds good. All right. And you're going to pull up my slides for me, right? There they are. All right, everyone. I'm going to go off camera, so that'll give you some more to see there. So let me turn that off. All right. So we've been through an interesting series of events these past few years. The title of the webinar, as you can see, is Hiring Changed, Recruiting Didn't, How to Level Up. So what I'm going to do is take you through kind of a little bit of a historical journey, and then we're going to go into what we can do about where we are now. So I just want to kind of give you the landscape of what we've been through, bring you to today. So it's going to go on a little bit of history lesson here. So let's walk through this and get you going. So really what's happened is we've been through a really interesting series of events. And I think it's indicative of these specific points in time. So let's go back in time, shall we? So 6 years, unprecedented disruption. Think of it this way. It's been about 50 years of events kind of almost compiled into 6 years. That's the way I look at it. There was the COVID disruption. That was a big event. There were shutdowns, uncertainty, hiring freezes, and layoffs. It put us in survival mode. TA teams were first to be cut. Then you come to 2021. And then as things started to recover, you had mass exits, war for talent, recruiter boom, rising salaries, and burnout. So overnight, we had a change, like a hiring spree. And that really put us in kind of a unique perspective, right? It just put us in this place where the Great Resignation, you heard about that, war for talent, all these things. Then you moved into the next year, and then the inflation scenario from the economy started to catch up. Interest rates started to go back up again. You had economic pressure, budget slash, growth slowed, hiring paused, cost replaced growth. Hiring was one of the first expenses cut. And then you go to then we get into this whole remote work thing. But that had been with us for several years there. With COVID, it had been thrust upon us. Then it kind of came mainstream. This is just giving you an idea of what it felt like. So you're going through all these series of events as a recruiter, trying to keep up with it all. 2024 came around. We had these return to office mandates, employee trust fractured, attrition. You just had all these different things. Rigid mandates drove talent away. It became part of the reason that candidates were negotiating. Then AI really kind of started to take over more and more. And so all these series of events have been with us to some degree, but then they started to accelerate. So I think 2025 is really the year where AI acceleration kind of took off even more. And so TI tech lagged. You had these fake resumes coming into play. You had roles transforming before you. You had bias and governance concerns grew. And then we're in today's market where it's kind of like a labor market reset. We've got skills over degrees, selective talent, longer hiring cycles. The hiring bar has changed. The reset is here. It's an interesting world, but this is what it's been. It's been a reactive leadership reality, and that's what you felt. And these are just, I'm calling out various things in these years just so you can see what was happening. Now, the cost of the gap, expectations rose, support didn't. The widening distance between what T is asked to do and what it's given to do it with. 90%, and these, you can see the source data on the bottom there. Source is good time, but 90% of organizations from their survey are missing hiring goals. 26% of candidates from the candidate experience survey in 23 was talking about a positive hiring experience, where 74% were saying there was some kind of issue. And that was showing in their data. 78% of TA teams run on flat or reduced budgets. That's something that was captured by Aptitude Research in 2024. 41% of recruiters are considering leaving due to burnout. This is another survey, the Daily Hire. So each of these things has hit us, and I'm just calling these specific ones out because if you looked at earlier in the year, there was also another report from LinkedIn that was talking about the majority of candidates weren't sure if they could make it through this reality that we're in. And then there were the majority of recruiters that were also feeling they weren't sure how they were going to keep up with everything that was changing. And that's why it's because of these, go back to slide 2, it's because of these specific shock events that all began with COVID and took you to this moment in time. So again, compress all these issues in one short period of time. The cost of reactive leadership is it hurts the proactive approach. You become more reactive. There's no workforce planning. TA teams were cut without a strategy, inconsistent EVP. So a lot of the tech companies went through this cycle. They ignored data and market signals. They didn't see them coming, and short-term decisions started to cause a bunch of long-term damage once the market starts to improve. And it's a cycle. And so this is where teams that continuously invest in TA can outlast the ones who don't. And that's the key, in my opinion. So I'm just putting this out there. It's it's to call out the fact that, you need to continue to invest in the strategic part of TA. That's very important. Otherwise, you start to see some of these issues with what's hurting companies now. Critical roles take longer to fill, higher cost per hire, stronger talent goes to competitors, so on and so forth, and gaps in capability and innovation. So here's some of the headlines. Look at some of these, and I know it's a messy slide, but I think it captures some of the current issues that we're facing, how AI is reshaping talent acquisition. It's right in front of us. Everybody's trying to, figure out where that's going. And it's increased the amount of resumes that you have to go through and the approach that you have to use. Small business optimism is still below average. Employers struggling to find right workers. AI's real threat to the job market isn't job loss, it's lower paychecks, lower efficiency, possibly if they haven't adopted it the right way, or they cut too deeply and their knowledge is gone. Labor market could become so backward that the economy will have to shed jobs to keep unemployment steady. That's an interesting one. Consumer prices rose, so inflation is back in the mix in the headlines again. The GDP growth slowed in second quarter. So these are all the things you see. And so I keep an eye on what the Fed is doing. And they give us some real signals on what's happening in the data and what's going on. And it is good to kind of keep an eye on that because it starts to give you an idea of what you're facing and why. So just understand that the history of these past few years has kind of dictated where we are today. And that's really the point. So this next one is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what this is showing is it's showing how there was, if you look at back in 2021, you see that there was a big hiring spree to get people back. And you also had a bunch of layoffs. So you kind of see that right there. That's a big blip on the screen. It looks like you're on those medical scanners. But that's exactly what happened. So before it, you could see it was fairly steady. It was kind of driving up to the 2020s. All of a sudden, there was this big kick up in 2021, and it's gone back into a level set is what's basically happened there. So it's evened out is really what that's showing. The next one is the low fire, low hire balance that you've heard about. That's what this is showing. Is it's showing that there was a big uptick in what was happening, and then it started to level set again, and that's really what you're seeing there with this chart. So let me keep going here. The next one, and you'll get access to these slides, so don't worry about that. I just want you to kind of see what's been going on. So shaded areas indicate U.S. recessions. There's a dip there. And then you look at the 2010s, we're kind of back to where it was in 2006-ish, middle 2007 there. And, it's kind of leveled back there. But you see that big uptick of the cost index where the wages went up and then they went back down again. That's really what that's showing. So each of these charts is consistent with each other. You see a rise, you see a dip. That's really what they're showing. So they're really interesting charts for that reason. Now, hiring, how a slow labor market and AI adoption have impacted unemployment rates among labor groups. The one that's really interesting to call out is that there's been an uptick for recent college graduates. And so look at that middle chart there. The other ones have remained fairly steady, fairly even for the most part. They've been kind of had a little bit of an uptick, but if you look at I'm basically talking about the average. That's where that is. But the recent college graduates are really suffering right now and getting hit hard. And part of that has to do with the AI adoption, eliminating entry-level jobs. Now, that could have a future problem for us, a future consequence, if you will. Let me keep going. So next one here is the unemployment rates for recent college graduates versus other groups. You see the one that I want to call out is all college graduates. That's on the lower end. So they've had a pretty good series of events that have hit them. And that's what that's showing. It's just showing that they're getting hit pretty hard with some of their own unemployment rates. So the unemployments have ticked up a little bit for them, is what that's showing there. My next slide is industries with the most projected growth over the next few years. And the big one is educational and health services. That one doesn't surprise me. Professional and business services, the next one, leisure and hospitality, construction's up there, financial activities, transportation and utilities, and then it goes down from there. So these are the ones that are going to grow the biggest, and that's where the most demand is going to be over the next 10 years. So the coming talent crunch. So what I was basically showing you, we're having an expected uptick in the amount of retirements that are happening. So there's a shrinking labor force participation rate. That's what this chart on the left shows. There's mass retirements coming, which is going to leave about a big shortage of about 13 million positions across the board. This is every industry. So what you're basically seeing is the other issue is that there's going to be a succession plan problem. So if we see job demand shrinking for these entry-level workers and their jobs are going down, that's going to be an issue in the future. So I'm just clicking back through some of these. So this is the shrinking entry-level jobs pipeline. So take a look at that. This is really interesting because you look at how it's shrunk since 2020. So it's been shrinking. These are the entry-level jobs that are open. And so you look at that chart shrinking, going down. What does this basically mean? There's going to be a mass exodus of knowledge workers with the baby boom generation. And then there's going to be no real succession plan if this is the continuing trend line. So it's something to watch, but this is my own interpretation of this data, but that's something that's very interesting. So I went through these quick, but I wanted to show you where we've been and where we're going and what's essentially happening. Because I think all those charts really kind of show the story, what we've been through, the challenges that we face. So a broken pipeline, the need for a succession plan. We need to have succession planning built in. We need to think about that. So 63% of employers report a lack of qualified entry-level candidates, a 48% decline in entry-level job postings, 3 in 4 companies saying they are struggling to build bench strength for the future. And then that could face a shortfall of 13 million skilled workers. That's essentially what the future holds if present trends continue. And we don't know if they could accelerate, but that's what all these data points are showing. And again, these are all being pulled in basically from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and also the Fed information that I gathered that from. So the new workforce reality, 3 forces, which brings us to one challenge: baby boomer retirements that are going to increase, shrinking entry-level pipeline going down by 60%. And then you have AI productivity boost, but not a full replacement, a growing gap in skilled talent availability. And you can see projected net skilled worker availability is going to go down. And this is across all industries. If you take them all and you do the average, that's essentially what's going to happen. It's going to go down, and there's not going to be as many available workers. So even with AI in the picture, you've heard a lot of people say AI might take our jobs. Well, AI will create new jobs, but will people be ready to fill those jobs? That's the question. So it's a skill talent gap is what you're facing in the next 10 years with all data sources forecast. And this is consensus. So I actually created this chart with the help of some information from AI. So wanted to put that out there. And we'll also have questions. So this is kind of a summary now. So then versus now, we didn't fall behind, the ground moved and the role moved with it. So what does this mean for you as a recruiter? What does it mean for you and where you were? Back prior to 2020, there was stable hiring demand. The recruiter was the process owner. Hiring managers own talent decisions. Tools support the work and success to equal filling roles. That's a large extent of what we were feeling, right? But then you get into this series of events with these unprecedented events, once in a lifetime circumstances, new technology, all sorts of things. And you compress it into a 6-year window. You have constant market volatility. The recruiter now needs to become an advisor, an analyst, and an operator. You need to wear multiple hats, even more than ever before. We were wearing hats before. We were the talent advisor. We were the folks that were guiding the process to conclusion. But it almost feels like you need to be an economist or a technologist or a person that understands all these different nuances to some degree. You just have to have a real understanding of it. That's the key. Get fluent is what I'm saying. That's what I would advise you to do, is get fluent in all these things so you can feel comfortable with it and talking about it with decision makers. TA is expected to influence talent strategy. So you don't have to be a guru in the forecasting or anything like that, but your paradigm needs to shift. You're influencing, you're giving knowledge up front for a hiring manager to be a decision maker on a better level. And that's really what it comes down to. So as I go into the next one, the solutions to stay competitive. This is build a strategic talent function. Shift from order taking to business advisors. You've intuitively known this, but come to each intake meeting with market data whenever possible. You can get, and I'll show you a slide where you can get this data from. There's several different places. Invest in workforce planning. This is work with a strategic workforce planning person that looks at the whole picture, that takes in the risks. We'll talk about SWOT analysis in a little bit. Elevate the candidate experience, which increases your brand. Leverage AI intelligently. Automate the repetitive tasks. Focus humans on high-value relationships. That's a big one. Close at each stage of the process. Every stage, be absolutely closing with that candidate and interpreting any objections that come up. That's where your value lies. But you do that with the information and data at your fingertips, but you now have greater ability to pull in than ever before. It's the power of AI. It can do that with the right prompts. Design flexibility with intention. Balance remote, hybrid, and in-office for productivity and culture. Remember that some candidates will negotiate based on the flexibility you give them. So you can save money on salary and maybe get a great worker to join your team. Develop and retain your people. Internal mobility, career paths. Be clear about this. Make sure they understand where they can go. What's the future look like? Many workplaces are struggling with this part of the equation on the backside once they're hired. What does the future look like? And use data signals to inform your HR teams and partner with them as a talent acquisition professional to help them, open the door to that candidate's future. Use that as part of your closing process in the offer stages. So they, use all this to your advantage. It's a holistic point of view from a talent life cycle perspective. So the talent advisor model, strategic partner, market expert, talent champion. You may have heard about the talent advisor model along the way. But really, what is it? Think of it this way. It's being the person that anticipates things before they come. So before the intake meeting, you pull together information about market intelligence and strategy. You talk to the hiring manager very knowledgeably about what the market looks like. What are the competitive factors? What are the risks for pulling in talent and helping that talent stay? That's the key, is understanding some of those nuances and creating the bigger picture for your hiring manager to understand. But you do that by being fluent in certain market tools, and that's key. So each of these steps: discover and understand, deeply understand the business, the role of the team, and the challenges, the business objectives, role success factors, team dynamics, current state and plan points, define what great looks like. Always have a persona in mind. A persona is a marketing concept adapted to recruiting to help be that more effective in attracting talent. And that's where market intelligence fills in the gaps as well. Then you go to the hiring manager and you talk through the challenges. And once they see how difficult it might be if they get everything on their list, maybe they're flex on 70 to 80% of the skills. And then you've got the upside of training someone who has a great attitude, looking at the human factor, which you can't see on a resume necessarily. And then that also aligns to help the manager get more talent options, because the more flexibility they may have, the more options they have, is really what it comes down to. And that helps you attract and engage the top talent, because then once your hiring manager is engaged in this way, it helps you to be a better attractor of talent and be more proactive in your outreach. Your messaging hits more deeply to the candidate and gets them excited about your role. You assess and advocate confidently. Assess fairly and advocate with confidence. You're talking through the big picture stuff that the manager doesn't see. You get past the cultural fit pieces and go deeper. And you go beyond feelings and go to actual rudimentary tools that help you with a score sheet that helps you get the right outcomes in the interview, all from the beginning of the screen all the way to the end and the offer. Onboard and drive long-term success. Onboarding is one of the big ones. There's a lot of candidates who report they're not satisfied with that experience. And even candidate experience and how you close the loop. There are still many organizations who don't send an email to close with their candidates. Each of these stages creates the holistic, different parts of the talent acquisition process. They're all interconnected, is what I'm trying to say. And that's why it's so important. Let me move on from this slide. So I think the other thing is resetting expectations before you open the rec. So whenever you come to an intake meeting, you've got a hiring manager with a checklist. They have a bunch of different things. And this is where you want to keep on some of the input that you have about what the hiring manager wants. But then you ask the questions that come from being informed about the market, data, and intelligence piece that help you ask the right questions so your manager can flex. Because when they can see a picture of the data of how big the market is, there's a power with that. You can use many tools for this. LinkedIn can show this. A tool from Hire Easy can show this. You can just show them how much the market changes when you add or take away criteria. And that's important. You should do that real time with your manager, whether that's by sharing your screen or whether that's just having a few sample profiles to talk about. So these are all things that are important. The new talent advisor conversation. Does the talent actually exist? Is it a technology that's only been around for 3 years and the manager wants 5 years of experience with it? We've all had that conversation. Is the compensation aligned, or is it too far off the mark? What flexibility do you have to have in order to attract that talent? Are the requirements realistic? What are the competitors doing? Do you have any idea of what challenges your competitors are facing? And is there anything that you can adopt through your research that might help you? It's an ongoing battle. What trade-offs are acceptable? So this opens your pool up, but you don't, I like this bottom part. Great recruiters don't collect requirements. They reset expectations before hiring goes sideways. So you remember when you get into the process, if you were just an order taker, if you were a new recruiter and you remember doing this at some point in your career, you just said, okay, I'll do what you ask, but you don't push back on anything. This is where you have to come to the table with data to back up your assumptions and your conclusions to influence the hiring manager's decision to help them make the right decision so that they're also compliant and that they open the door to underrepresented groups or a wide variety of other pieces of the puzzle there that are so important. So this is the conversation you need to have. Now, don't be mean about it. Ask great questions like, well, is this particular requirement needed, or is it something you can train on? That's a great question. Are the years of experience that you need for this job actually relevant? Those are the questions you should be asking. And it opens the door to further dialogue. And that's the point. Once you get your hiring manager starting to talk and there's a dialogue, this is where all of these nuances of being the recruiter of the future come into play. And that starts to accelerate your effectiveness. And that's exactly what you want. Now, these are competitive talent intelligence tools. These aren't all of them, but they are a pretty good list. So you want, for the competitor available talent process, here's a few that work really well. The Bureau of Labor Statistics can give you a pretty good idea of how big the market is based on all their tools and levers that they pull. LinkedIn company pages, Owler, Dun & Bradstreet. All of these are great tools to look at what competitors are doing and the competitor talent landscape. Here's a few other ones. Yahoo Financials. These are great. The Labor Market News, Talent Neuron, Revelio Labs has a great tool. Gartner, Hire Easy, Seek Out, the ADP Employment Report, Salary.com, and others to consider. Combine multiple sources for the most complete market view. You can also use ChatGPT to get some of this data, which can also help you in progressing forward the way you want. So those are all things that are vitally important at this stage of where we're going towards the future. But be conversant in at least a few of these tools. They are all great resources for competitive talent intelligence. The next one is SWOT analysis. I like to talk about this because I think it's becoming increasingly important to what the future looks like. But you should do this, I would say, on a quarterly basis at minimum. What is going on in your organization and what is happening with your current talent acquisition function? What are your strengths as a team? What are you doing well? What are the unique resources that you have? What other things could you do to become even more effective? That is a great thing. Take an inventory, if you will. That's the strengths part. The weaknesses is, okay, we have these particular skills that we lack and we want to get better at. Determine what those are as recruiters, or yourself for that matter. You can do this for your own desk. You don't have to do it as an organization alone. You can do it for yourself. I try to do this for myself at least once a quarter. So weaknesses, look at all the different things that are going on. What do you need to improve upon? Where are you lacking the resources or capabilities? What do others see as our weaknesses? What is the perception of your team? And how do you change that? That's another factor to consider. Opportunities, external factors we can leverage. So what trends are taking place right now in the market? What challenges are happening with competitors? What are circumstances that are macro level things that candidates are struggling with? Hint, inflation. What unmet needs can we address that may attract talent, or even address the concerns of your managers? I would say gather multiple points of information to inform your decision making and help you inform your managers so they can make good decisions. That's exactly what you're doing with this SWOT analysis. Where can we expand or innovate? What can you do differently? What technology stack is going to make you be more efficient? Are you spending a ton of time doing data entry as a talent acquisition pro? Or is the tools and systems you're using cutting down on that time to allow you to consult with managers more or talk to candidates more? Time savers, AI has power to do that, to free you up to be more consultative. That is where you can start looking at options. Threats. What are the external challenges that could impact your success in your industry, in the technology that's coming, in the candidate pool, in the shortage of talent that may be coming? What are the threats? I showed you a few of those to kind of give you the landscape, and I went through that very quickly, but I just wanted you to see a little bit of what we've faced these past few years so you can understand that you're not alone. This is something that every recruiter has felt, and I think that's important to say. So this is where the power comes from. Strategic clarity, competitive advantage. It helps you keep moving in the right direction and continuing your strategic growth as a team, as an organization, and as a recruiter. So 5 key questions to ask hiring managers. These are all great questions that can help you in consulting with them. What surprises you most about this labor market data? So as you start to gather this information from whatever resources you have, and again, you can do this in a very informal way, or you can be a little more formal about it. It's up to you how you proceed. Just do something that allows you to inform your managers a little bit more to make your job easier. Because again, it pays off on the back end as your hiring cycle shrinks and there's a direct impact to the competitiveness that you have in TA and attracting the right talent to you. So what surprises you most about this labor market data? Is it lower talent supply, higher salaries, the competitors hiring aggressively? Does it mean there's longer hiring timelines because this skill set is very niche? Given what we're seeing, which requirements are truly non-negotiable? Talk about that. And what you'll find is as the manager's starting to see this in front of them, there's an actual correlation to them being more flexible and opening and widening your talent net. It's a powerful thing. It means that the hiring manager starts to think more broadly, and it gives them more options for their decisions, which is what we should do. That's exactly what we're trying to do. If this market won't support our original strategy, what are we willing to change? That could be any of these things. You have several levers in front of you. Compensation, location, could it be remote or hybrid? What's the experience level? Adjacent industries that could be easy to come into yours. Internal talent pipeline. What's your succession plan look like? All those are great questions. The purpose, it builds flexibility into the hiring strategy. Where do our strongest talent competitors have an advantage, and how will we compete? This is always an interesting question. Do they lag, or do they compete? Are they more competitive in the market salary rate? So it's an interesting question. You should observe benefits. You'd be amazed at how much benefits can change everything. Even being remote. Does your culture have a side effect where word on the street is showing you different things? Do yourself a favor and go to the subreddit recruiting hell on it, because that's a place where they're spreading anonymous information about companies. It's worth taking a look. Hopefully you're not on the list. Just something to keep an eye out for. There's also Glassdoor. You don't want a bad Glassdoor rating. Being an employer of choice is a powerful thing. Look for that in your branding in some way, shape, or form. If you can get on one of those lists, they help. And again, what do all those have in common? They generally treat the employees really well. They generally do everything in their power to help move people forward. There's genuinely, they might be on the higher end of the salary band frame. What can you flex to do those things to make yourself more competitive? Maybe the talent competitors have the advantage, and why? Why do they? It's something to think about as you have those conversations. Based on this data, what would success look like in 90 days instead of hiring the perfect candidate? I love this question. We've all had those hiring managers that say, well, I think this is this is what I need. But getting them to talk through this, it may help them realize it's unrealistic. A purple squirrel or a unicorn in today's environment is probably not always the best choice. It's not always going to lead you to maximum success. Maybe 70 to 80% of the way there is the way to go. And that's something to get managers to talk about. These are all things they need to think about. And this is where that data comes in. It helps you do this and talk about that real time. Next slide for you. So influence beats activity every time. So there's a lot of people who think you got to increase the output. You've got to increase this amount of reach out. So you got to do this. But sometimes it just might be as simple as having a dialogue with your hiring manager to help them understand the reality, which then opens the door for you to be able to attract talent in a better way. And this is where this new transformation of with everything going on in TA, the organizations that invest in this strategic stuff will have an advantage in the future. And because resources have been cut in the past, many organizations are struggling with this. And this is why they're a little bit behind the eight ball, because they didn't always have the budget to proceed with. But if they invest in their TA teams, there is actually several studies that show there's a direct correlation to their effectiveness, which includes them getting on those lists and their employment brand improves. There's a direct correlation to that. So the activity trap, more meetings, more candidate outreach, more reporting, but hiring outcomes don't improve. You've probably seen this trap before. That comes to some degree from changing your paradigm from one of, I need to do what the manager says, to, I need to inform the decision process and give more information so my hiring manager has more info. And and this, honestly, the biggest thing you'll ever see when you do this is it takes courage, is the word I would use. It takes 100% complete courage to do this, to be able to push back. But this is what gives TA a seat at the table with those big discussions and the big players in the room in the C-suite, is actually not being afraid to say, this is what the market shows, and this is why. That's a powerful, powerful place to be. Why is this requirement non-negotiable? What evidence supports this profile? What's the cost of waiting? What's the risk of staying misaligned? What's the opportunity cost for staying in our present way of doing things without innovating and changing along the way? That's the question. That's the question. And it's becoming more important than ever before. Let me keep going. So why activity alone won't win? The activity trap. You get into this cycle. I call it the rat race cycle. You're constantly on a hamster wheel, and it's going round and round. You've seen the hamster wheel. It's a wheel, but it's stuck. It's not moving forward. But you get out of the hamster wheel when you start to look at ways to impact better decisions, smarter conversations, better aligned decisions, stronger hiring strategy, better business outcomes. That's the key. Imagine if your paradigm shifts and downstream, the perception of your talent acquisition team is that they're consultative and business partners. Do you see the paradigm shift from an order taker to someone who's informing what's happening and why. That's a much more powerful position to be in. It changes everything. Influence turns effort into impact. I love this word, and I always will. What is my impact? What is TA's impact? What is the hiring outcome that builds maximum success for the future? That's the place to be, because that's what changes everything. And it gets your hiring managers to a place of more calm. It creates better candidate experience. It creates alignment. Your process just there's so many factors that start to fall in line as you start to approach things with data. That's what happens. It's powerful. Again, order taker to decision influencer. That's a very powerful place to be. High performers don't just support decisions, they shape them. And that's the key. It's not that you're not collaborating with your manager. You actually are, but at a higher level. You're more prepared for business discussions with your hiring managers because you come ready to talk about it. And it's a complete paradigm shift. Yes, still fill positions. Yes, still do all the things you do to keep the process moving, but make it easier on yourself by having dialogue up front, so the hiring manager can help you, and you can help yourself. Those are all very powerful positions to be in. All right, I need to speed up a little bit. So influence cycle, how can we create better hiring outcomes? We understand the real need. We bring market intelligence. We collaborate on strategy. We execute with focus and agility. You keep your promises. So part of this isn't just coming to the table with strategy and talking through all that. Yes, that's part of it. That's the beginning. But then you have to execute on the back end. That's do both together. You're dangerous and unstoppable. Measure influence and business impact. That's when you start to see everything starts to happen. Real influence leads to real results. Better decisions, stronger talent, faster outcomes, and business impact. Those are all powerful things. Stop reacting to demand. Start anticipating it. Most organizations wait for a resignation, a new headcount, business growth, skill gaps, then scramble. Instead, look ahead. What do you see coming down the horizon there? What does that forecast look like? What is your attrition risk? What are the workforce skill gaps? What are the market supply shifts? Future business initiatives? Where do all those lead for future hiring? And can you get ahead of it now before there's an actual wreck? If you can, and you start doing that ahead of time, you start to create real pipelines of talent before the need is even there. And that's a very powerful position to be in. What future problem are we about to create? That's a powerful question. Instead of how do we fill the role, to what is the downstream impact, cause and effect relationship? That's a great way to think. Stop reacting to demand, start anticipating it. Another thing, internal mobility trends, workforce skill gaps. I think I may have repeated that slide twice, but anyway, I'm going to go on to the next one. Stop reacting to demand, start anticipating it. The one that I think is key here is build talent foresight. That's what the call out is on that slide there. So it's the progression is what that is. Okay. So you go from reactive to then proactive to then the impact shaper or the talent architect. There's a term today, and it's called the talent architect, and it's a very powerful position to be in. So you go to the next iteration here, which you become this impact driver to a transformative actor. And that's exactly what that looks like. You're building ecosystems of talent. You're starting to get ahead of the curve more. You're being the one who's bringing in talent before your competitors even know what they're doing. That's the thing that happens when you start doing all this the right way. And it builds. Don't just move faster, see more clearly. So AI today, what are a lot of people using AI for? Writing job descriptions, sending messages, screening resumes, summarizing notes. AI's bigger opportunity. Where are the hiring bottlenecks? What skills are becoming scarce? Which assumptions are wrong? You type in the right prompt, ChatGPT can bring you data. So that's a big key, is learning which prompt to think about. And that as you have these conversations, that'll start informing what you need to do to actually get that AI to do research. And in fact, ChatGPT has a whole research function that can help you. And it's great at compartmentalizing and pulling data together for you. That's a powerful tool. It should improve recruiter judgment. And I think that's where everything is headed, honestly. It doesn't replace the recruiter. It sharpens the recruiter's judgment. And that is the way to look at it. AI today equals efficiency. It helps do all these different things. But then its bigger opportunity is strategic planning, deeper visibility, and insight. AI removes the grind so recruiters can focus on what creates impact. Again, that key word, impact. How do you see around corners? How do you anticipate need before it arises? AI has that power. Revelio, who I will call out, is very good at that. It's a great tool. The recruiter of the future will be empowered by AI to make decisions and influence decisions. So these are things that it'll do: talent supply and demand, skills intelligence, workforce trends, quality and risk signals. These are this is where AI will take you. And this is where you can get fluent and can become even better. Your time to fill will go down. You'll become, again, the talent architect is the term I envision for the future. A person that's behind the scenes, pulling things together and influencing hiring manager decisions while you're executing. What a powerful position to be in. And that's where everything can go. I think we're at Q&A now. I didn't want to go too much longer into that, but I think we have enough time for Q&A here. So thanks for being here. I hope this was helpful, but I do want to answer some questions before we jump on. Hey, can you pull up the questions? Let's see what we got here. So let me see if there's any of the Q&A. I'll answer these. No Q&A, but if anyone has questions, that's in the chat. Is there anything out there? Josh? I can't hear you, man.
No questions yet. I was having trouble getting my screen to come back up, but this is a great opportunity. If anybody out there has any questions, we do have a few minutes here. There was a few comments in the chat. This was a great presentation. If anybody didn't see my comment before, the slides here are available for download as well. Mike was generous enough to include the PDF. So at the top, there is a handout section. So please feel free to grab those slides. Looks like Bianca has a question here.
I do a fit analysis and also for candidates as well, and HMs love it. Any thoughts on this? Oh, that's a great question. So I think fit analysis is always appropriate. I think that just means that you look at the overall candidate pool. I think this is to qualify your question. I think you're looking at the overall candidate pool and how qualified they are for the most part. Is that correct? Is that kind of where you're going with that? I think that's the essence of that question. But a fit analysis to me means you're looking at each stage of your process and you're deciding if, you know, the candidates that are coming in generally are meeting your criteria or not. Is that I think is a good exercise. That seemed to be where that question was going, Josh. I think I answered that.
I think so. And I'm going to pop these questions out so I can see them better. There we go. I think that was right. And if there aren't any questions, we can absolutely give some time back to everyone.
Yeah, I hope this was helpful. And feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to type my LinkedIn in there for everybody. Oops, let's see.
Okay, we've got some more questions coming in. Do you want me to read these out or do you want to just review them?
Yeah, go ahead and read them out for me, Mike. I'm just putting in my...
Next question is from Carol. When we try to use ChatGPT or Copilot for talent intelligence, the data is often dated. Do you have any ideas on how to get better data?
Yeah, let me read that. Was that in the chat?
That was in the chat, yep.
Okay, so I think what you can do in that sense is tell in your prompt when you do a ChatGPT prompt, if I can even speak today, or a Copilot prompt, make sure you're adding that you want data from a specific source from X year to X year. And that has worked for me. So if you do that, I think that's a good tip. That's a way to do that. And that seems to help many times. So if you just ask a generic prompt without a date range and say, please find the most recent data that supports X conclusion, that should do that. Just make sure your prompt is pretty clear is what I'm saying.
I did move some of the questions from the chat over to the Q&A column. Sarah's got a question. Are there any tips to automate the collection of the competitive talent intelligent tools shared on the slides instead of checking every single one?
So many times, yeah, I think a lot of talent intelligence data, some of these tools that were discussed, like Revelio Labs or Talent Neuron, they do capture a lot of it for you, depending on what the specialty is of that tech stack. So it really just depends on which tool you're using and why. So I think the key is to really kind of know what you want and why you want it. So if you're going for a specific set of data, the most important thing I can suggest is make sure if you're using a tool like ChatGPT to kind of pull stuff in, the more specific your prompt is, the better it will be. Now, as far as automating it, I think a lot of those come down to, there's many of these tools have the ability to, you can tell it to capture data from X period to X period and to keep an eye out for future data. And then it can actually pull it in on a set timetable for you. That's a way to automate it too. So like, for example, I have a running report in ChatGPT that I use for my purposes to kind of analyze competitor data. And that keeps me informed each week, and it sends it on a regular basis. So I can kind of keep an eye out what's happening. And I ask it to keep an eye out for headlines or information. And I give it a list of the competitors I want to track. And then I say, track these specific companies for a period of time and capture information that comes in about them. And then you can actually set up your AI tool to do that. It's actually a really cool trick. It's all in your prompt,
Next question. What are the known delays or gaps in public data like BLS availability and wage data?
So I think some of the delays come down to when it was gathered. So for example, you're always going to be the one thing you may have to be aware of is that BLS tools like ADP, they're always backward looking. So for example, if you look at the ADP employment report, just as an example, it's going to have a set period of time. So it says, this is the data coming from the start of this month to the end of this month. And the one caveat is that data may not always be to the minute, is what I'm basically saying. So look at how they the way you can tell is how they gather the data. So for example, if you go down and you look all the way at the bottom, there's usually a caveat or a little bit of an explanation of how they gathered it. And then it also explains the period of time that it was gathered. And that's how you can usually tell if it's more current or not. I think that answers your question, but that's the one problem, is it doesn't always show to the minute, depending on the source.
Mike, this was excellent. I appreciate you putting this together. I think that's about it in terms of questions. Would happily schedule more content like this in the future. We do have a lot of other webinars kind of on the horizon. So everybody out in the audience, please stay tuned for more webinars coming up in the future. And if you haven't checked out the agenda for the upcoming Recruiting Innovation Summit happening November 10th and 11th in San Diego, please check that out. We've got a great lineup of speakers available who's going to be presenting a ton of information about the future of talent acquisition as it's being shaped in real time. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Mike, thank you so much for putting together this presentation, and we will see all of you very, very soon.